He didn't just slap me. He erased me, in front of everyone. The chandelier lights trembled as his hand struck my face, and somewhere behind the shock and the taste of blood, I heard my mother-in-law whisper, almost tenderly, "Now you'll finally learn your place, Sharon." For a second, the room froze. The guests looked away, pretending not to see. That was the moment I realized I had been invisible to them all along. A ghost wearing diamonds, tolerated, never loved. But what none of them knew was this. The moment his palm met my skin, the code I'd buried in that diamond necklace went live. And while they watched me fall, the FBI was already on its way. My name is Sharon Whitby, and that night, my own birthday, was the last time anyone mistook my silence for weakness. The mornings in that house always began with silence. Thick, deliberate, polished silence. I'd wake before dawn, hear the faint ticking from the clock in the grand hallway, and wonder if it was counting down to something. The smell of burnt toast and overbrewed coffee drifted through the air, while the lake outside lay perfectly still, pretending peace. Across the breakfast table, Margaret would read the paper without looking at me. Her voice would break the quiet like a blade through glass. "Don't do anything that makes people think you've lost control." Elliot would nod absently, as if obedience were the only language he knew. I'd sip my coffee, pretending not to taste the bitterness that had nothing to do with the roast. That house beside Lake Geneva looked flawless from the outside. Tudor roofs, ivy walls, arched windows reflecting calm water. But inside, every reflection felt like surveillance. The beauty wasn't warmth, it was armor. The Whitbys lived behind glass, untouchable, unfeeling. I had been silent for 3 years, collecting details the way other women collect jewelry. Every transaction, every charity wire that moved money to places it shouldn't. The longer I watched, the clearer it became. Whitby Foundation didn't heal anyone. It laundered power. Then one morning, a white envelope waited beside my plate, sealed in gold. An invitation in my mother-in-law's handwriting. A celebration for your 36th birthday. Hosted at home. I stared at it until the words blurred, then smiled. 3 years of silence were enough. That night would not just mark another year of my life, it would mark the end of theirs. It happened on a Wednesday afternoon. The maid was dusting the Steinway in the living room when I heard a faint clicking sound beneath the soft hum of the vacuum. The piano belonged to Margaret. She played it every night, gentle nocturnes that sounded almost tender until you realized she used them to cushion whatever cruelty she was about to deliver. When the house finally quieted, I waited a full minute before crossing the marble floor, lifting the lid. I saw it, a small USB drive wedged near the frame, its casing dulled with dust. My pulse slowed to a frightening calm. I carried it upstairs, slid it into the hidden laptop I kept inside my closet, and pressed play. The recording cracked with static before her voice filled the room. Precise, cold, almost surgical. "Donnelly, if you want the money, it has to go through the charity fund. No one audits the children's wing. Sharon will sign if needed. She never reads the documents." Then a man's voice, low, confident. "Good. I want the first transfer before next month." I didn't feel my heartbeat or the sting in my palms from gripping the desk. Outside, the light over Lake Geneva turned sharp and metallic. I copied the file, slipped the drive into the silver necklace Margaret had given me on my wedding day, the one she said would remind me that I belonged to this family. That night, I called Jonah Price, the only person who ever believed me capable of more than polite silence. "You're living in a snake pit," he rasped. "Get out now. If I leave, who opens the door for you? You don't understand. Without a search warrant, we can't step foot in that house. You're the only legal access we have." I stared at the lake beyond the window, its reflection fractured by the moonlight. 3 years of waiting, collecting, pretending. I finally understood. I was the door. "I'll stay until my birthday," I said, and hung up. The surface of Lake Geneva shimmered back at me, and for the first time in years, I recognized the woman in the reflection, not a wife, not a daughter-in-law, but someone preparing for war. The next morning, I walked into the dining room to find Elliot already seated, his hands trembling over the newspaper. Margaret stood behind him, placing a glass of water and a white pill by his plate. "Your vitamins!" she said with that motherly softness that could rot steel. I watched the pill fizz and dissolve, leaving a pale ring at the rim. I knew its formula. I'd investigated the pharmaceutical company that made it years ago. A mild sedative, easy to dose, easier to deny. Margaret caught my stare and smiled. Don't worry, Sharon. Keeping him calm is best for everyone. I murmured a polite yes, but every syllable she spoke carved itself into evidence. That afternoon, she summoned me to her office. The air was thick with lilies, their sweetness turning sour in my throat. She slid an envelope across the desk, her nails tapping the seal. We've reviewed your accounts. Starting next month, your expenses will be handled through the foundation's accountant. A pause. And the doctor called. You can't have children. The words landed like small, clean bullets. Whitby needs an heir. After your birthday, we'll have to discuss alternatives. She stood, smoothed her blouse, and left the room, her perfume lingering like smoke after gunfire. I sank into the chair, pulled out my phone, and typed a message in code to Jonah. The curtain will fall on my birthday. The reply came instantly, not from him, but from a number I hadn't seen in years. I know about the Swiss account, but it's under Elliot's name, Marta, the housemaid who'd been fired for reading what wasn't hers. A thin, sharp smile tugged at my lips. So that was her plan. Not just to drug her son, but to hide behind him, make him her legal shield. If I was going to bring Margaret down, I had to free him first. I crossed to the window. The lake outside was glass still, too calm to trust. But I knew beneath that serene surface, the current had already started to change. Margaret called it a pre-birthday dinner. But everyone at that table knew it was a meeting dressed in candlelight. The crystal chandeliers bled gold onto a table, long enough to seat a jury. Each place card gleamed with engraved names, and every face wore that same frozen civility, the kind that hides rot behind etiquette. I was seated between a tax attorney and the foundation's accountant, both men careful not to speak unless Margaret did. Elliot sat at the head beside her, posture perfect, smile hollow, the scent of beef Wellington, lilies, and wine tangled in the air, sweet, metallic, suffocating. Margaret tapped her spoon against a glass, her voice smooth as polished marble. I'd like to say a few words before Sharon's birthday. My daughter-in-law understands that in this family. Reputation is everything. Applause followed like programmed obedience. I smiled too, because not smiling would have been a declaration of war. Every compliment from her was another invisible thread tightening around my throat. Halfway through the meal, Senator Donnelly arrived late, shaking hands with everyone except me. He leaned close to Margaret, lowering his tone. Is everything in the safe account? Of course. The transfer cleared yesterday. Elliot signed. The fork nearly slipped from my hand. They were laundering money in plain sight, confident that I was too ornamental to matter. When I stood to pour more wine, Elliot's voice stopped me. Where's your necklace? My hand went instinctively to my throat. I took it off to polish. His eyes flickered, quick suspicion planted by his mother. When I returned, Margaret signaled to the new maid, Elisa, who quietly lifted my phone from the sideboard and disappeared. My heart stuttered, but my expression stayed calm. They'd find nothing. I'd burned every trail weeks ago. The senator leaned in again, whispering, If there's trouble, clean it before Monday. Reporters are circling your foundation. For the first time, color drained from Margaret's face. For the briefest moment, power looked fragile. When the dinner finally ended, I offered my thanks, as any good Whitby wife would. Inside, I was already drafting the conversation I'd have with Jonah that night. Later, I sat on the back steps, the chill from the stone seeping into my bones. The house glowed behind me, its windows glittering like the surface of a lie. I looked across the lake, its reflection fractured under the wind, and wondered if justice could ever slip through glass and velvet. The water whispered its answer in ripples against the dock. It can, but it will hurt. Past midnight, I drove down to a bar that smelled of bourbon and burnt wood, a place without last names, where laughter was rough and honest. Jonah sat in a corner booth, sleeves rolled, a man carrying too many secrets. We're ready, he said. But there's a problem. What kind? No warrant? Not without probable cause. We need a visible crime, a wound, a direct threat. I traced the rim of my glass, watching my reflection warp in the amber. So, They have to hurt me. He didn't answer. The silence confirmed it. If they do, you come in fast. When you say the show's over, the data uploads. And Sharon, don't fight back, no matter what. I nodded. The plan was complete. They would open the door to their own downfall. Outside. The air burned cold. At the dock. Elliot stood in the dark, hands shoved into his pockets. Where were you? Just clearing my head. Mother says you're planning something. What do you think? He hesitated. Don't make her angry. She's always right. He walked away, leaving only the echo of obedience. The man I married had been erased. When I reached my room, the door was ajar. A plain envelope lay on the desk. Inside were photos of me and Jonah at the bar, captured through glass. Beneath them, one line scrawled in red ink. Don't betray this family. I crushed the paper in my hand. There was no turning back now. My birthday would be the day they lost everything. That afternoon, Lake Geneva lay unnaturally still, a mirror pretending peace. I stood before the mirror, fastening my earrings, studying the stranger who stared back. Her skin was pale, her lips a dark crimson slash, her eyes sharp enough to cut glass. She looked like someone waiting for the end. The gown Margaret had chosen shimmered black and silver under the light, the kind of beauty meant to suffocate rather than dazzle. On top of the bed lay her note. Don't embarrass the guests. A graceful woman never draws attention. If she only knew what I'd hidden beneath those layers, an encrypted recorder, a transmitter pulsing just under my skin, she might have picked a different color, perhaps black for mourning. Descending the staircase, I saw the house glowing like a cathedral of lies. Elliot waited in the foyer, handsome, empty, his smile mechanical. You look beautiful, he said softly. Beautiful like a museum piece, I thought, but I only nodded. From the parlor, Margaret's voice floated out, sweet but edged with iron. Elliot, greet the guests. Sharon, remember to smile. The ballroom filled with wealth and pretense. Senators, judges, and socialites shimmered beneath chandeliers. Margaret moved among them like a queen who believed herself untouchable. The piano began, the same nocturne she always used to drown conflict. I felt the transmitter hum faintly beneath my collarbone. Jonah and his team were close. I just needed to speak the words. Margaret raised her glass. Let's toast to Sharon, the woman who's finally learned the value of silence. Laughter rippled through the crowd, brittle and cruel. I smiled back, hands steady only on the outside. Elliot's eyes flickered toward me, pleading and hollow. Margaret's fingers tightened on his shoulder, pressing into the nerve at his neck, a signal. His hand trembled. Red wine spilled over the white tablecloth. Are you all right? I whispered. Don't make her angry, he muttered, voice cracking. Margaret's smile widened. Elliot, you forgot to congratulate your wife. He turned toward me, face slack, eyes dark. Sharon, I'm sorry, Mother said. The slap came like thunder. The glass shattered, crimson spreading across the marble, mixing with the taste of blood on my tongue. The music stopped. Every whisper died. I looked up, met Margaret's eyes, and smiled. The show's over. Lights burst through the windows, red, blue, white. The front doors crashed open. FBI! Everyone on the ground. Margaret froze, the flute slipping from her hand and exploding on the floor. Around us, her perfect world began to fall apart. Panic swallowed the room. Those who had bowed to Margaret now dropped to the ground, shielding their faces from flashing lights. Boots thundered across the marble. Jonah entered first, voice steady over the chaos. Margaret Whitby, you're under arrest for money laundering, financial coercion, and obstruction of justice. Margaret lifted her chin, the ghost of arrogance still clinging. You have no warrant. This is an outrage. Jonah held up my necklace, its silver chain gleaming under the lights. Evidence was transmitted from this property. We have our warrant now. Her face fractured, the mask finally breaking. Elliot fell to his knees, hands over his head. I didn't know. He sobbed. She said she'd stop the medication if I didn't obey. You don't owe me excuses, I said quietly. Just tell the truth. He looked up, tears streaking down his face. She controlled everything, my accounts, the firm, even me. Two agents grabbed Margaret's arms. You have the right to remain silent. One recited, She twisted, screaming, "You'll regret this! My family is power itself!" The last champagne glass tipped, spilling gold across the broken floor. I stood watching, feeling a hollow lightness bloom in my chest, relief sharpened by grief. Elliot sat motionless, lost inside himself. I knelt beside him. Justice leaves no room for those who stand in between. I whispered, "You choose truth. Or silence." He wept softly. "I'm sorry. Don't be sorry for me. Be sorry for who you became." A female agent approached, voice low. "We found the Swiss account. It's under your husband's name." I closed my eyes. Of course. Margaret had built her fortress using his name as the foundation. Now he would answer for it too. Justice spares no one, not even those I once loved. The blue and red lights flickered across the spilled wine, painting it purple like bruises, healing in slow motion. I looked at my reflection in the glassy floor, steady, unbroken. Jonah's hand rested gently on my shoulder. "It's over," he said. "Not yet," I murmured. "This is only the beginning, because once the darkness is stripped away, that's when you finally see what light is made of." The ballroom, once filled with laughter and champagne, had turned into a field of shattered glass and flashing lights. FBI agents moved through the haze like shadows, their flashlights scattering off the chandeliers. The sound of handcuffs closing echoed louder than any applause ever had. Margaret stood cuffed in the center of the room, her hair disheveled, lipstick bleeding at the corners. Yet her arrogance clung like perfume. "You're making a mistake. I'll have my lawyer fix this. Elliot, say something." Elliot sat on the floor, face pale, hands trembling. The man who once commanded courtrooms now couldn't meet my eyes. Jonah's voice came from behind me, hoarse but firm. "We need access to the office safe. Second floor, password, Lac Geneva 88. Margaret lunged forward, shouting, "She's the traitor! She destroyed this family!" I met her gaze. "No. You destroyed it the day you mistook control for love. I just ended it." Her voice faltered, finally swallowed by silence. When the agents cleared the room, I crouched beside Elliot. "You had choices," I said softly, "and you chose wrong. Outside." Blue light spilled through the curtains, no longer harsh, but calm. Justice, I realized, was simply light you could stand beneath without fear. 3 months later. I sat beneath the glaring lights of the National Committee for Financial Integrity. Cameras blinked from every corner, recording every breath, every blink. Across the long table sat 3 people, Senator Donnelly, face ashen, Elliot, pale and hollow, and Margaret Whitby, wrists cuffed, still pretending to be composed. Behind me, Jonah and his team waited, silent as stone. The chairwoman leaned forward. "Mrs. Whitby, why did you stay in that house knowing the risk of violence?" I met her eyes. Because justice can't enter a place where truth is afraid to speak. I only opened the door. The room went still. The scratching of pens filled the air like a ticking clock. Jonah gave a small nod from the back, half pride, half sorrow. The verdicts followed. Margaret Whitby, life imprisonment for money laundering, bribery, and financial abuse. Senator Donnelly, expelled from office and charged with corruption. Elliot Whitby, 10 years for concealing assets. No applause, no celebration. Only the sound of chairs scraping and cameras shutting off. Justice doesn't thunder. It breathes quietly, steady and unyielding. Outside, a reporter called, "Do you regret sending your husband to prison?" I stopped, looked into the lens. I didn't send him anywhere. I just stepped aside and let the truth do its job. That night, I founded Project Phoenix, for those trapped in silent control. I named it for the woman I saw in the mirror, one who rose, unbroken, from the ashes. A year later, I returned to Lake Geneva. The Whitby estate was gone, sold to strangers who knew nothing of what had happened there. Only a stretch of weathered stone wall remained by the water, a remnant of everything that had once pretended to be permanent. The lake was calm, mirroring a pale autumn sky so clear I could hear the wind move through my hair. I walked to the same spot, the edge of the terrace where I had stood on my birthday, where the slap had landed, where silence had once seemed safer than truth. I opened my hand. The platinum ring lay in my palm, cold and dull in the fading light. Without hesitation, I threw it into the water, The sound was soft, almost kind, as metal met the surface. Ripples spread outward, catching sunlight until the lake looked like it was holding a mirror to the sky. He hit me to make me silent. I whispered, but my laughter ended an empire. The words vanished into the wind. A white swan drifted past, unhurried and regal. I watched it glide away and thought, some things don't need to shout to be remembered. They simply exist, leaving their quiet mark behind. I turned from the water. The wind bit at my skin, but it felt clean, honest. The sun slipped low, turning the surface of the lake to gold. Behind me, the waves lapped against the shore, soft, rhythmic, like the applause of life itself. Justice had spoken, and I had learned the difference between revenge and freedom.